Hello everyone, welcome back to FAD Learning. My name is Sushma, and in the next 2 hours, we will explore the latest features and updates in Angular 21. This video is perfect for those who already know Angular and want to level up with new features in version 21. But if you are new to Angular, I recommend starting with my Angular 19 tutorial where I cover each concept in depth. And once you got a solid foundation, you can jump back into this video to learn the exciting new features of Angular 21. So let's dive into the Angular 21 agenda and then learn each feature through practical examples. First, we will set up a new Angular 21 project and learn about the changed project structure. Next, we will understand the updates on HTTP client. Then we will cover the updates on the zone.js library. After this, we will learn about signal forms, where we will understand how to create a signal forms with validations, and we will also learn about the set, update, and reset methods. So kindly watch the video till the end. You will definitely learn a lot. After that, we will learn about the Angular ARIA library, which is very easy to use. We will see how to use it with examples. Following that, we will discuss TailwindCSS, a newly added CSS framework in Angular. And if you are new to this style sheet framework, I am sure you will confidently work with TailwindCSS after completing this video. And lastly, we will learn about the updates on the style guides, where we will learn the difference between class versus ng class and style versus ng style. So these are the topics which we are going to cover in this video. And if you want, you can jump to the specific topic with the help of the timestamps given in the description below. Okay, so let's get started with the basics and explore what's new in project creation and structure in Angular 21 compared to Angular 20. We will start by installing Angular 21 together. But first, let's check the current Angular version on my system. Let me open the CMD. Let me increase the font size. And here I'll run command ng space v. Hit enter. And here you will see the details like Angular, Node, Package Manager, and operating system versions. Along with this, we will also see the other package versions like Architect, Core, Semantics, Angular, etc. And as you can see, I am currently on Angular version 20. Now next, let's install the latest version of Angular, which is Angular 21. So here I'll use the Angular CLI command npm I for install -g for global @angular/CLI and hit enter. This command automatically will install the latest version of Angular. Okay, now if I run the command ngv again and hit enter, and this time we can see the Angular CLI, Node, Package Manager, and operating system versions. But the package list is gone. We can see only the versions of Angular CLI, Node.js, Package Manager, and operating system. Okay. So as you can notice the difference here, Angular 20 shows the version along with the packages, while Angular 21 only shows the version details without packages. Hope you understood this difference. Now next, let's see how Angular 21 differs from Angular 20 when creating a new project. So let me create a new folder called Angular 21. And I'll go inside this folder and here I'll open CMD. Now I'm using the same command, that is ng space new space project name. I'll write Angular 21 to create a new project. And once I hit enter, you notice that in Angular 21, it no longer prompts for zone.js library. It's added by default. We directly get to the style sheet question where we need to choose our preferred style sheet format. And as we can see here, the second option, the Tailwind CSS, is now an option alongside the standard CSS options. So simply choose according to your requirement and hit enter. Now next, the second question will be, do you want to enable server-side rendering and static site generation? I'll press Y and hit enter. Now, after pressing Y, we will be prompted with another question, configuring the AI tool in our project. And this is the new question in Angular 21. That is, which AI tools do you want to configure with Angular best practices? And again, you can choose according to your needs and hit enter. And now it will take few seconds depending on your internet speed to create a new project for you. So let's wait for few seconds. And once you see this message, packages installed successfully, it means we have successfully created a new Angular project in version 21. And I hope you noticed the differences in creating a new Angular project with version 21. Now next, let's see the project structure. So for that, let me go inside the project Angular 21 and then let me hit the command code space dot to open the same project in Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, so here let me increase the font again. And if we expand this src folder, here we can see the main.ts file, and inside app folder we can see the app.config.ts file, and we can see the app.html, app.css and app.ts file. Along with that, we can see the approutes.ts file and approutes.server.ts file. So it's similar to Angular 20. The component prefix is omitted from each component level file. Before Angular 20, the component file name was app.component.html, app.component.scss, but from Angular 20, there is no component prefix. And the same change we can see inside the Angular version 21 as well. Inside package.json, we can see the version of our project, that is 21. Also here we can see the dependencies and dev dependencies. Now here let me open the terminal using Ctrl plus backtick, and here let me create new component using command ng for generate, c for component, and I'll create the test component. So here I am creating a new component using the CLI command. I'll press Y. And as we can see here, we get 4 files without component prefix, similar to Angular 20. If I open the HTML file, you can see the test works. And if I open the TS file, the same boilerplate code is coming. And the same goes for services and directives. For example, here I'll create a service, ngg for generate, s for service, and service name, let's say user. Here also you can see the service prefix is omitted. Okay, so far I don't see any significant structural changes from Angular version 20 to 21. Now last, let me run this project using command ngs as for serve and hit enter. And if we navigate to this localhost 4200, we can see the default UI of our first Angular 21 project. And let me render the test component on web by adding its selector to the app component. So here, let me delete all the default code. And here, I'll add the selector of test component. Also, I'll import the test component inside the imports array. Let me delete this router outlet and add the test component. Save the changes and let me navigate to the browser, and the test component is successfully rendered on the web. Okay, so it appears that the structural differences between Angular 20 and 21 are minimal, at least based on what we have seen so far. Okay, now let's move on to the next update. What's new with HTTP client in Angular 21? So first, let's explore the HTTP client's evolution. If you're familiar with multiple Angular versions, then you know that HTTP client was first introduced in Angular version 4, and it remained stable until Angular version 14. Next, Angular 15 brought standalone APIs, allowing HTTP client to be used without importing HTTP client module. Then in Angular 18, HTTP client module was deprecated in favor of provide HTTP client and provide HTTP client testing functions. And now in Angular 21, HTTP client is said to be provided in a root injector by default, eliminating the need for manual configuration with provide HTTP client. Which means in Angular 18, 19, and 20, we had to manually add provide HTTP client in the app.config.ts file to use HTTP client. However, starting from Angular 21, HTTP client is provided by default, so manual configuration is no longer needed. Hope you understand this. Now, let's verify this with a practical example. We will integrate the JSON placeholder dummy user API. So I'll open the API in the browser, JSON placeholder, and I'll open the user API URL. So I copied this URL. Now let's jump into our Angular 21 project. And inside this project, we already created a new user service. So let me go inside user.ts file, and here I'll paste the API URL into a local variable called base URL of type string equals to user API. Now next, to integrate the REST API, we will inject HTTP client through the constructor. So here I'll write constructor private underscore HTTP colon HTTP client. Then I'll create one method called getData, and inside this method we can send the HTTP GET request to this base URL. So I'll write return underscore HTTP dot get of type any, and inside round bracket I'll pass the base URL. Now save the changes, and next let's call this getData method in the required component. And since we are rendering the test component on web, we will inject the user service into test.ts file through its constructor. So here again I'll call constructor private underscore user of type user service. After that, I'll declare a new variable called users list of type any. And then here also I'll create one method called user data, and inside this method I'll subscribe to this users get data method and store the response in users list. So I'll write users list equals to, I'll call the service underscore user dot method get data method dot subscribe, and inside this subscribe response arrow function, I'll store the response inside users list. So users list equals to response. Okay. After that, I'll also add a console.log to verify the value of users list. Inside console.log, I'll write users list. That's it. Okay. Now save the changes and let's check the browser. Before that, I have to run this project using command ngserve. Okay, now I'll navigate to this localhost 4200. I'll inspect this page and we won't see any list in the console because we haven't called this user data method on page load. So to fix this, I'll implement the onInit interface and call this user data method inside ngOnInit lifecycle hook. User data. Okay. Now save the changes and revisit the browser. And this time we can see the users list in the console, line number 21. Okay. But if you have gone through my Angular 19 tutorial, you will know that if I did the same coding in version 19, it wouldn't work. Because as I said earlier, in version 18, 19, and 20, we need to add provide HTTP client method manually in app.config.ps file to work with HTTP client. But now in Angular 21, we have successfully loaded API data in the browser without needing the provide HTTP client method. And this highlights the key difference between Angular 20 and Angular 21 when it comes to HTTP client. Okay. Now last, let's quickly render the API data on web using the @for control flow block. And for this, first we will import the common module inside the imports array, and then I'll write the syntax of @for control flow block. So here inside div, I'll take one UL, and inside UL, I'll write @for. And now I'll iterate the loop over the users list, because we're getting all the list inside this users list variable. Semicolon and then track list dot id. And inside this @for, I'll take li, and then I'll write, let me see the response. We will display the name and email ID, or username and email ID. Okay. So let me write list dot username and then hyphen and list dot email. Okay. Now save the changes and let me restart this server using command ngserve. And if I navigate to the browser, data is available on the console but not on the web. Okay, let me see list of user list. So data is coming inside user list. Okay, here we don't need to write this dot user list. Directly we can subscribe to the get data method and store the response in the users list. So let me check, is this working or not? Yes, it is working. And now we can see the usernames along with their respective user IDs on the web. So with this, we have successfully integrated a dummy API without manually adding provide HTTP client method. So we should say thanks to its default inclusion in Angular 21. I hope you found this update helpful. What we did, we have sent the HTTP GET request to this dummy API from the service file. And after that, we have subscribed to this method from test component. And last, to display the user's data on web, we have used the @for control flow block. And one more thing here, I am using a normal variable instead of a signal and registering the dependency through the constructor. However, you can also use the inject method. I'll be using that approach in future videos. Next, let's compare the changes related to Zone.js between Angular 20 and 21. With Angular 20.2, zoneless change detection has become stable, and Angular 21 takes it a step further by making zoneless default for new applications. So let's compare how this works in Angular 20 and Angular 21. In Angular 20, when we create a new project, you are asked, do you want to create a zoneless application without zone.js file? However, in Angular 21, this prompt is skipped and new applications are created zoneless by default, as I showed in my previous video. And also you can see the difference here as well. In Angular 20, you can see the prompt, do you want to create a zoneless application without zone.js? Whereas in Angular 21, zoneless related prompt is kept. Only you have to select this style sheet, then server side rendering, and then AI tools. After that, your Angular 21 project will get created for you. Now next, to see the difference, I have opened two Visual Studio Code editors, one for an Angular 20 project and one for an Angular 21 project. I'll open the package.json file in both windows, and you can see the project version inside that file. This project is in version 20 and this project is in version 21. Now I'll search zone.js library. And as we can see, the zone.js is present in the Angular 20 project, but it is missing in Angular 21 project. Here we can see no result found. Next, Let's look at the app.config.ts file. So I'll open this file in both projects. And if zone.js is available in the project, you will see the provide zoneless change detection function. And that's exactly what we see in this Angular 20 project here in line number 10. However, in Angular 21 project, this provide zoneless change detection function is not needed and it's not present in this providers array because zone.js is not included here. Okay, so what's this mean for us? Angular applications are now zoneless by default. The provide zoneless change detection function is no longer required in new applications, as Angular will use zoneless change detection automatically. And if your application relies on zone.js, you will need to explicitly add provide zoneless change detection in app.config.ts file. But if you are updating to Angular 21, a migration will automatically add it for you if necessary. And that's the key difference between Angular 20 and 21 when it comes to zoneless. Also, if you want to learn more about zoneless change detection, then you can check out my previous videos. I'll share the link in the description below. Now, next, as you are probably aware, Angular is moving away from RxJS and Zone.js and adopting a signal first approach. So today we are going to explore one of the most exciting features introduced in Angular 21 called signal forms. So what is signal forms? A signal form is an experimental library created by the Angular team that helps us to manage state using Angular signals to provide automatic synchronization between your data model and the UI with Angular signals. So in this video, we will dive how to create signal forms with validation in Angular 21. And if you're already familiar with reactive forms or template driven forms in Angular, you will notice the differences and understand why signal forms might be a better choice. So let's get started. I'll open Visual Studio Code and here first I'll create new component using command ng generate component name signal forms, and inside this app component template file I'll add the selector of signal forms component. Also, I'll import the signal forms and delete this test for now. Okay, now I'll run this project using command ngserve and let's test the signal component is rendered on the web or not. Let me navigate to this localhost 4200 and as we can see the signal forms component rendered on the web. Now we can start the coding. Let me open the signal forms component template file as well as TS file. So let's get started by creating a simple login form using signal forms. So here, let's use a basic HTML tag. So first I'll write form and then I'll take one div. Inside div, I'll add label and the first field I'll take email. And then I'll take one input field of type email in placeholder, enter email. Similarly, I'll take one more div for password and the password and input type is also password. And after the second div, I'll take one button with type equals to submit and button name is login. Okay, so this is how I have created simple login form. Now let's focus on class file. So let me minimize this and I'll split this window and open the TS file here. And inside TS file, first we need to create a variable. And in Angular 21, we need to create signal variables instead of regular variables because the application is zoneless. And in zoneless application, changes to regular variables don't trigger automatic updates, but signals are designed to track changes and update immediately. For example, if we update a signal variable, its new value will be reflected right away, even if we log it to the console after a delay. So from Angular 21 and above, we must have to create signal variables. But here, before creating a variable, first we will create an interface to define the structure of our login form. Interface name, let's say iLogin data, I for interface. And this interface will have two properties, email and password. So email of type string and password of type string. Now I'll create new signal variable called login model equals to, we need to write signal in order to create a signal variable. And here we can specify the type. So inside triangular bracket, we need to write the interface name, iLogin data, and it will store the data inside object. And while creating structure, we have taken two fields, email and password. So here also we have to write the same fields, email colon empty string and password colon empty string. Now next we need to create a signal form by calling a form function and passing it to the signal variable, that is login model. So here I'll create signal form. I'll name it login form equals to form function, and inside this form function we need to pass the signal variable, that is login model. And we need to import this form from angular/forms.signals. Okay. So this login form is assigned the result of this function call. And the form function returns a form object that provides access to form data and validation results, such as login form.email for accessing the email field's value and validation string. So then let's bind the email and password fields to our template file using two-way data binding. And in signal forms, we need to use field directive instead of ng model for the two-way data binding. And to use field directive, first we need to import that directive, which is imported from angular/forms.signals package. And now inside template file, I'll write field directive inside square brackets. Field equals to login form dot email. Similarly, I'll write for password. Field equals to login form dot password. Okay. So this field directive is used to bind the property of the form object, and this login form dot email or login form dot password is the property of form object. Okay. So inside template file, we have created simple form, and inside class file, we have created a signal variable. We have created the interface, and then we have bind the login form properties to the template file. Now last, we need to create a method that will be triggered when the login button is clicked. And in signal forms, we can achieve this either by assigning a click event handler to the login button like this. Click equals to function name or method name like on submit, or by specifying the submit event on the form tag here. Instead of click, we need to use the submit event like this. So both approaches work well. Like either you can call this on submit method from this button using click event, or you can call this from the form tag using submit event. So I'll go with this submit event, and let me define the same on submit function inside the class file. And inside this function, I'll log the signal variable, that is this dot login model. So that with the help of this console.log, we can see the user entered value. And to access the signal variable's value, we need to use the parenthesis like the function call. Okay, so I have added the parenthesis after login model. And now let's navigate to the browser. Let me inspect this page. Navigate to the console tab. Let me clear the console. And here I'll type abc@gmail.com and password 1234. And once I click on the login button, you will notice that the credentials are being appended to the URL instead of being logged to the console. I'll do it one more time. Let me clean the URL. And now here I'll type abc@gmail.com and password 1234. Now I'll click on the login button. You can see the same user entered credential is appended to the URL. And this is because we are not using the zone.js library. So to prevent this and handle the form submission correctly, we need to pass the $event parameter when calling the onSubmit function and use it to prevent the default form behavior. So let's do that. $event, and let's update the onSubmit method in our TS file to accept the event of type event. And then we need to call the prevent default method on it. Event.prevent default. So this method prevent the credentials from being appended to the URL. So now when we test this form again, the URL should remain clean and the credential should be logged to the console. Let me delete this credential from the URL and refresh the page. Let me clear the console, and again I am entering the same email and password. Now when I click on the login button, the form is submitting correctly and the credentials are logged to the console. And one more thing to note, when we log the entire form, like this login form, let me log this here, login form, and now save the changes. Let me re-enter the credential, and once I hit the login button, you can see the entire form is printed here and the entered values are nested under structure, then values, and then under symbol this signal, and under values we can find the user entered credentials. But while logging, the form model signal gives us a direct object representation of the values. Okay, so far we have covered the basics of creating a simple form in Angular using signal forms. Now let's take it to the next level by adding built-in validation for required fields, email format, minimum length, and more. And to add validations, we will update the login form in our class file, this login form. And for validation, this form function takes two arguments. First is the login model, which is a signal holding form data, an object with email and password properties. And second argument is a callback function that defines the validation rules for the form. So let's add the second argument to the form function, which we will call schema path. So here I'll write a CHEMA path. Next, we will use a fat arrow syntax to define the callback function, where we will specify our validators. So fat arrow syntax, and inside curly braces, let's start with the required validation for the email field. So for that, we will use the required function and pass schema path dot email along with the options object that specifies the error message. So inside curly brackets, I'll type message colon error message. Email is required. So this will display the email is required if the email field is empty. Next, we will add the email validation using the email function. Email, and inside round brackets, first argument will be schema path dot email, comma, second argument inside curly braces, we need to write the message. Message colon, enter a valid email address. So this email validator will validate the input as an email address and display the enter valid email address if it's not in a correct format. Okay, so we have written required validator and email validator. The syntax is straightforward. Just call a validator function, pass the property you want to validate, that is email or password, and then specify the error message in an object within curly braces. Now similarly, I'll add required validation to the password field. So I'll copy the same required validator here and update the property. Password, and password is required. And this third validator will display password is required if the password field is empty. Okay, so far we have added 3 validations, and now inside HTML file we will use @if blocks to conditionally display error messages based on states like touched, untouched, valid, invalid, etc. So let me navigate to the template file, and here I'll update both div, email and password. So first we'll work on email. After this label, I'll add if condition @if, and inside that I'll write login form dot email dot, I'll use property touched, and login form dot email dot invalid. If the email field is touched and invalid, then in this case I'll take UL, and inside this UL I'll use @for control flow block. And we will use this @for block to iterate over the errors in login form dot errors. So here I'll write error of login form dot email dot errors. And then I'll write track error. And then inside LI, I'll use string interpolation error dot message. Now save the changes. Okay, so here I have used if block to add the condition touched or invalid, and @for block to display the error message. And to use if and for block, we need to import the common module. Now I'll copy the same if and for block and paste it inside the password div. Here instead of email, I'll write password. Now one last thing, let's disable the login button until the form is valid. So inside the template file, I'll write disabled inside square bracket equals to login form dot invalid. Okay, now save the changes, and let me refresh the page. And before testing the validations, let's add some CSS to make the form look better. And since I haven't written any CSS yet, I'll copy paste the CSS from Angular's official documentation, as we have worked on the similar form. I'll navigate to angular.dev, and here I'll search the form. Inside forms, I'll go into signal forms and then validations. And here I'll click on the source code, and I'll copy this whole CSS from this app.css. And I'll open the signal form CSS file, and here I'll paste the CSS. Okay, let me copy this again and paste it here. Okay, so here all the CSS are applied to the tag names like div, label, input, and there is one class error list. So this class I'll apply to our errors. Inside this UL, I'll write class error list. Same I'll do for this class equals to error list. So by doing this, we can see the error in red color. Okay, now save the changes and let's navigate to the browser. Let me refresh the page, and CSS is not yet applied. So let me rerun this project one more time. NGS signal forms HTML. There is an error. Okay, it should be disabled, not disabled. Okay, now save the changes, and still we are getting error. Here we don't need to use parentheses. I think in the email also I have added. Okay, now no error. Okay, let me close this and navigate to the browser. Let me refresh the page, and now the login page is looking good. So let's test this login form end to end. If I touch this email input field and I leave the cursor, we can see the error message, email is required on the web. Similarly, if I touch to the password field and leave the cursor from there, then we can see the error message, password is required. Now last, if I write only ABC You can see the different error message, enter a valid email address. So we have to enter the correct email address, means along with @ and dot. And after that, if I type the password error message also gone. And if I click on the login button, we can see the entered credentials on the console. Let me do it one more time. Refresh the page, touch both the fields and leave the cursor from both the fields. We can see the required error message. If I type incorrect error message, then we will see the error, enter a valid email address. And if I enter a valid email address, then there is no error message for email field. Similarly, inside password, we can type any password and then you can click on the login button. Okay. And that's the end of this video. If you're familiar with Angular's reactive forms and template driven forms, you have probably noticed how much simpler signal forms are. But if you are new to these concepts, I have created separate videos on reactive forms and template driven forms with validation examples. So kindly check out these videos. Links are available in the description below. And I hope you now have a basic understanding of the Signal Forms API. I repeat, this is an experimental API, so it's great for practice, but wait for the official release before using it in production. Now, in part 2, we will take it to the next level by learning how to set, reset, and update Signal Forms programmatically. And finally, we will wrap things up by comparing all three Angular form types, such as Signal Forms, Reactive Forms, and Template Driven Forms. So you can choose the best approach for your next project. So let's get started. And we have understood how to use built-in validators. For a quick revision, I'll add two more validations such as min length and max length. So let's add the min length and max length validator to the password field. And the syntax requires is we need to call the validator function, that is min length, and then we need to pass the arguments. And the first argument is the property name we wish to validate, which is schema path dot password. And the second parameter for both min length and max length is the length. So for min length, I'll set it to 5, comma. Third argument will be error message in an object within curly braces. So message colon, the error message for min length is password must be at least 5 characters. Okay. And one more thing here, you can give any name to this callback function. I have written schema path, but you can give anything. Now, same like min length, I'll write the max length validator. Here we need to import this max length from signals package. And for max length, we need to specify the maximum length. So I'll set it to 10. And the message for max length validation is password is too long. Okay. Now let's run this project using command ngserve and see how these validations work on the web. Let me navigate to localhost 4200. And here, if I touch the field and leave the cursor from that field, we are getting the required error message for both the field. But for this password field, if I type 4 characters or numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see I get the min length error message, that is password must be at least 5 characters. And as soon as I type the fifth number, the error message goes away. And like this, we can add maximum 10 character or numbers, not more than that. So I hope you now understand how to implement built-in validations in Signal Forms. Now, let's move forward and update the form models programmatically. And in Angular, there are two types of signals, writable signals and computed signals, which is also known as read-only signals. And to change the value of writable signal, we can use either the dot set method or the dot update method to compute a new value based on the previous one. So let's explore this further. We will start by setting an initial value and then reset it when a button is clicked. And to set the initial value, we can provide it when creating a signal variable Like I'll update this login model signal variable. Here I'll pass the initial value, for example, fad@gmail.com. The password is fad1234. Now save the changes and navigate to the browser. And here you will see the initial values displayed on the page load itself. Now, if you want the form to be blank initially and allows user to populate it as needed. So in such a case, we can set the initial values on button click. So let's do that as well. And to achieve this, I'll create a new button called set. Here, I'll update this button name to set. Also, I'll add a click event, and this event will bind with the function set form. Next, let's define the same function inside the class file. I'll increase the font, and inside this set function, I'll call the login model. This dot login model dot. Now I'll use the set function to initialize the email and password values. So this is a function. So we need to write the parenthesis, and inside curly braces, I'll write the same email and password properties. And I'll remove the initial values from the page load. So what we did, we have created a new button to set the initial values, and we called setForm function on top of that button. And inside that setForm function, with the help of .set method, we have initialized both properties, email and password. Similarly, we can reset the values using the same .set method by passing an empty string. So let's quickly do that as well. Instead of set form, I'll call reset form, and the function name will be reset. Let's define the reset form function inside the class file. And again, I'll copy paste this login model from set method to reset method. And instead of passing the values, I'll set it to empty string. Now save the changes and let's test the set and reset functionality on the web. So here on page load, the form is blank. And when I click the set button, the email and password fields are populated with the given values. And when I click the reset button, these values are cleared. So this is how we can use the .set method with the signal variables. Now next, let's populate the form values using the .update method. For now, I'll comment out this validation and let's focus on the update functionality. And here we can update all form fields or just a single field, depending on the requirement. So let's explore both approaches. So first, inside HTML file, I'll create two more buttons. One is for update all form fields, and the function for this update all form fields, I'll call update form. Okay, and next button is for single field. So email update. The button name is email update, and the function name for this email update is update email form. Now let's define both the function inside class file. And to update a single field value, we need to pass a value as a parameter to the function. So here, let's pass the email ID fedlearning24@gmail.com. And just for FYI, this is my working email ID. So feel free to reach out to me at this email address if you have any doubts. Next, I'll update email form function. Here I'll pass new email of type string. Okay. So we have defined both functions inside class file. Now, inside update form function, we will update both fields using the .set method. So here I'll write the code first and then I'll explain. Login form dot email parenthesis dot value dot set. Inside set, I'll pass the email ID fedlearning@gmail.com. Similarly, I'll write the syntax for password property. login form dot password dot value dot set fed123. Now here, this login form dot email and login form dot password are accessing the email and password fields for the signal login form. And dot value is accessing the current value of each field, and this dot set method is updating the value of the field to the specified new value. And in this case, the code is updating the email field to fedlearning@gmail.com and the password field to fed123. So let's test this first. Here we cannot see the update button. Let me save this HTML file. And now we can see the update button as well as email update button. But for now, we'll test only the update functionality. And to test this update functionality, let me set the default values first. And now when I click on this update button, you just focus on these two field values. Let me change the password button type to text so that you can see the password field value. Now, when I click on the update button, both field values should update to new ones. So let me click on the update button, and as you can see, the email field value updates to fedlearning@gmail.com. Previously, it was fed@gmail.com. And password is updated from fed12342 to fed123. Now next, let's update only the email value. And we will do this inside the update email form function. And we have already written this update email form function. It takes a new email parameter of type string. Now inside this, I'll call the login model dot update function. Login model dot update and parenthesis. Now this function is updating the login model signal with a new value. Next, I'll write the callback function, current, arrow symbol, parenthesis, and then curly braces. Because this is an update function that takes the current value of login model and returns a new object with the updated email property. So here, for current, I'll use the syntax of the spread operator to create a new object that includes all the existing properties of login model. And the syntax of spread operator is 3 dot, and then I'll write current, comma, email, colon, new email. And this is for overriding the email property with the new one. So it means this code is immutably updating the email property of the login model signal while keeping all other properties unchanged. So now let's test this as well. And to test this email update functionality, first I should click on set or update button. So I click on the set button. And now when I click on the email update button, only this email field should update. So let me click on the email update, and as expected, we can see the updated email address inside the same email input box. One more time, I'll refresh the page. Now I'll click on the update button. The email ID is fedlearning@gmail.com, and once I click on the email update button, the email value changes to fedlearning24@gmail.com. Okay, so in conclusion, we have successfully updated our signal form module programmatically. We can load the blank form initially, and we can set the default values on click of set button. Next, update button allows you to update all form fields value, while the email update button updates only the email field. And additionally, the reset button resets the forms to its blank state. So at this point, I assume that we should have a solid understanding of creating signal forms, adding validations, and updating form values programmatically. Now last, let me jump to the presentation and let's explore the differences between Angular forms. And Angular provides three approaches to building forms, such as signal forms, reactive forms, and template-driven forms. And each has distinct patterns for managing state, validation, data flow, etc. So this slide will help you to understand the differences and choose the right approach for your project. But if you are familiar with reactive and template-driven form approaches, you will likely notice the differences in coding style and the significant reduction in code lines with a signal form approach. Okay, so let's compare the different patterns, starting with state management in Angular forms. Signal forms use signals for state management, making it easier to handle complex forms in a reactive and efficient way. And reactive forms use a model driven approach, storing from state in form group or form control instances for easy programmatic access and updates. However, template driven forms store form data in the template and Angular updates it automatically as user interact with the form. Next, let's look at the validation differences. Signal forms offer built-in validations using signal-based API, making it straightforward to validate form data reactively. And reactive forms provide robust and programmatic validation. You can create custom validators to fit your needs, giving you more control over validation logic. Whereas template driven forms use simple validation with HTML attributes like required or pattern to validate form fields directly in the template. Next, let's explore the differences in data flow. Signal forms use a reactive signal based data flow. This means data updates are propagated through signals, making it efficient and reactive. And reactive forms follow a model driven data flow, giving you more control over the form data, and you manage the data flow programmatically, which is useful for complex forms. And template driven forms use the template based approach where data flow is automatically propagated between the template and the component. It's a simpler but gives us less direct control. Now, last, let's look at the current status of all three forms. Signal forms were introduced experimentally in Angular version 21 and are still being refined and tested. So their API may change. And signal forms are best for signal based applications. On the other hand, reactive forms are stable. It means they are fully tested and ready for production use with a well established API. And reactive forms are best for complex forms. Whereas template driven forms are also stable and ready for the production use, but these forms are best suited for simple forms, not the complex one. So these are the differences between Angular forms. To conclude, Angular 3 form approaches differ in their management of state, validation, and data flow. Signal forms are reactive and signal based. Reactive forms are model driven with high control and flexibility, and template driven forms are simpler and template based with less control and flexibility. So, that is all about signal forms. And now, let's explore the next exciting new feature in Angular 21 called Angular Area. So, what does ARIA stands for? ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It is a library with a set of rules and attributes that enhance the accessibility of our Angular applications. And with Angular Area, we can ensure our applications are both accessible and user friendly. So now let's dive into how Area works, and it's much simpler than you think. If you are familiar with Angular material, you will find this Angular area similar. Just copy paste the required code and you are good to go. With Angular material, you would copy paste the UI components, and with area, you will do the same thing with accessibility patterns. The key difference is that Angular material requires an external library, whereas area is a built-in Angular package. Simply install it via CLI and you are all set. No need to rely on external dependencies. And if you check the official Angular document, you will find everything about area. So I'll visit angular.io and I'll go inside version 21. Here you can find the Angular area. This is new feature. So added new tag in front of Angular area. So here you will find everything about Angular area from installation to all accessibility patterns with examples. Okay. So simply run this command npm install @angular/area and the area package will be added to your application. So let's parallelly install area in our project using the same command. Let me go inside Visual Studio Code. Here I'll open the terminal using Control plus backtick, and here I'll write the command npm install @angular/area. Okay. Now, after adding a new package or library, it's good practice to restart your application to ensure everything works as expected. So let me restart our project using command ng-serve, and let me navigate to localhost 4200. And here we can see our signal login form component. Now I'll create new component called area and render the same component on web. So I'll use command ng generate component name area, and inside app.html and app.ps file, I'll import the area component. So here I'll delete this signal form for now and add the area component. Inside template file, I'll add the selector of area, app area. Okay, let's go back to the browser, and now we can see the area component on the web. Now next, if we head back to the documentation, you will notice it covers various UI patterns such as accordion, autocomplete, combo box, grid list box, and more. And if you dive into any area pattern like combo box, you will notice that each example comes in three different UI styles like basics, material, and retro. The basic style offers a square box, material style offers a rounded corners, and last, retro style offers a bold square box. And the same basic material and retro style you can find in each and every examples. And the best part is you can choose any style as per your need and simply add the business logic HTML and CSS. Angular area will handle the accessibility aspects for you. But in this video, we will experiment with a few examples to give you a cleaner understanding of how Angular area works. So let's go one by one. And the first pattern is accordion. And it is a way to show and hide related content in sections that helps users to focus on what's important and avoid scrolling through too much information. Here you can see how it works. You click a button and it shows and hides the content related to it. So when we should use this accordion? We should use this accordion for FAQ, means frequently asked questions, breaking up long forms into smaller sections, reducing scrolling on lengthy pages, or showing more information step by step to improve more experience. So let's try to implement this in our Angular 21 project. So let's start with this single expansion mode. I'll show you the basic style example. Click on the source code and I'll copy the imports from the class file and I'll paste them into our area component class file. So let me open area.html and area.ts and let me close this app component. And on the left side, we will write the template code, and the right side, we will write the class related code. So inside this imports array, I'll paste the imports. And we need to import it from Angular/area package. So let me click on the add all missing imports and let me format the document. Next, we can copy the template file from this documentation. So let me copy whole template file and paste it inside our angular.html. Okay. So this is the way we can copy paste class file and the template file, and we can update the text as per the requirement. But for this example, I don't want to go with the copy paste option because to understand clearly, I'll write this example line by line. So we have imported these four modules in the imports array, which we are going to use in a template file. So here inside the div, I'll use ng accordion group. So we need to write ng before the module. So let me copy accordion group and paste it here. And this is the container element for the accordion group. After that, I'll apply the multi-expandable attribute with a Boolean value, true or false. So inside square bracket, we need to write multi-expandable equals to, I'll set it to false. And this will prevent us from expanding multiple panels simultaneously. Next, I'll take h2 tag, and inside this h2 tag, I'll use one more tag span, and inside this span, I'll use next import called ng accordion trigger. So let me copy this, and here I'll write ng accordion trigger, and which is used to trigger the accordion panel. And it's bound to a specific panel with panel ID. So here I'll write panel ID equals to P1. Okay. Then next I'll write hash P1 equals to ng accordion trigger. And this syntax is to create a template reference variable T1 that can be used to access a trigger's property and methods. Okay. And last I'll write inside square bracket expanded equals to true. This sets the initial state of the accordion panel to expanded. And now inside this panel, I'll write the heading first paragraph. Okay. And this code creates an accordion panel with a trigger that expands to show more content. And the panel is initially expanded, and the trigger state is bound to the panel's expanded state. Now next, let's move forward and use the next module, that is accordion panel, this one. So inside the template file, I'll take one more div, and here I'll write ng accordion panel with panel ID. Here we need to add the same panel ID, that is P1. So this container element links to the trigger element with the same panel ID. And in this case, the trigger element is this ng accordion trigger panel ID equals to P1. Now let's use the last directive, that is accordion content. And I'll add this directive inside ng template. So here I'll write ng template and paste the accordion content directive, which will contain the content of the accordion panel. And this content will be displayed when the panel is expanded. So inside this ng template, I'll add a lorem dummy text inside the paragraph. So here I'll write lorem and 100 because I wish to add the 100 words. So hit enter, and I'll format the document using command Alt Shift F. And now when the accordion panel is expanded, the content inside ng template element will be displayed. So let's try this out. Let me navigate to our Angular 21 project and let me refresh the page. It is not working. Okay, we are getting an error. Let me restart the server NGS. Okay, now I'll refresh the page and let's see. And yes, now we can see the heading first paragraph with content. And it is already expanded because we have set the expanded attribute to true. Okay, if I set it to false, we can see only heading. We can't see the content. In order to see the content, we need to click on the paragraph. Okay, so when we click on the heading, the content expands and collapses. Now I'll duplicate the H2 and content section. So here I'll copy this and paste it here. And here I'll update the heading and panel ID. So heading is second paragraph and panel ID is P2. We need to update the same panel ID to this accordion panel for the content. Okay. And here instead of 100 words, I'll just take 50 words. So lorem 50 and enter. And we have set expanded equals to false for both the paragraphs. So I wish to set expanded attribute true for one paragraph and false for another paragraph. Now save the changes, and if you navigate to the browser, you can see the first paragraph is not expanded, but second one is expanded. Now let me click on the first paragraph, and as soon as I click on the first paragraph, the content of the second paragraph collapsed because we have set multi-expandable attribute to false in the first line. Here you can see. It means only one can expand it at a time. So here we can expand and collapse both divs smoothly, but only one can be expanded at a time. And as mentioned earlier, this mode works well for frequently asked question or such a situation where you want users to focus on one answer at a time. And if you want to allow multiple panels to be open simultaneously, then you need to set this multi-expandable attribute true. And by doing this, users can expand as many panels as needed without closing others. So we can expand both paragraphs at the same time. And this mode is useful for form sections or when users need to compare content across multiple panels. Okay, so that's a basic overview of how accordions work. But for more information, kindly check the Angular documentation. Now next, let's look at the second area pattern, that is autocomplete. And it enables input field to filter and suggest options in real time, helping users to select values from a list. Like as you can see here, when I start typing a country name like or IN, the suggestion appears for country names starting with IN. I won't demonstrate each pattern individually as it's just a matter of copying and pasting the code. So let's quickly review the remaining area patterns together. And next pattern is combo box. Combo box is a tool that lets you choose from a list and which can include the autocomplete features as well. But don't get confused between autocomplete and combo box. Autocomplete is a feature that helps you to find something as you type, while combo box is a tool that can have the autocomplete feature. Okay. Next pattern is grid, and it enables navigation of two-dimensional data or interactive elements using arrow keys and other navigation keys. And as you can see here, grids are suitable for data tables, calendars, spreadsheets, and layouts that group related interactive elements. So let's quickly try this layout grid example. Now I'll copy paste the code from this example. I'll copy the whole HTML code from here and paste it inside our HTML file. Okay, here I have pasted and I'll update this expanded attribute to false. And here I'll add one h1 and write grid area pattern. Okay. And now for this grid template file, I'll copy the required code for class file. I'll copy the tags and remove tag function from here and paste it inside our area class. And also I'll copy the imports from here and paste it inside our imports array. Enter here and let me click on add all missing imports. Now save the changes and I'll revisit localhost 4200 and we cannot see the grid item. So let me add the CSS part and I wish to copy the CSS only for this ng grid. Let me open the SCSS file and let me paste this ng grid and then I'll copy this button. Okay, now let's check. Still we cannot see the content. Okay, let me see the error. Again, we are getting error. Let me rerun this one more time. And here inside this ng grid, I'll change the color to this blue violet. And I don't want this for now. Okay. Now save the changes and let's go back to browser. And now we can see the grid content. So here instead of close, I'll write just X. Okay. Now looks good. We should see the data with a cross symbol. And clicking on the cross button, the items are deleted one by one. In the document also you can see if I click on the cross button, respective button is deleted from the list. Okay. So this is the simple example of grid layout. Now next area pattern is list box. And going forward, to save our time, I'll provide only one-liner definition for each pattern. So list box is a widget that allows user to select one or more options from a list. So here you can choose one option and here you can choose more than one options. And this list box is a fundamental directive used by select, multi-select and autocomplete patterns. Now next, menu. Menu is a collection of options or commands that users can invoke. and this is used for list of options that users can choose from it. Next, menu bar. Menu bar is a container for a set of menus like this: file, edit, view, insert, format, and it is typically displayed at the top of an application window like navbar. Next pattern is multi-select. Multi-select is a widget that enables user to select multiple options from a list. Like here, we can select multiple options from the same drop-down. So this multi-select pattern works best when users need to choose multiple related items from a similar set of options. And inside list box pattern, there also we can choose the multiple options, but the difference between list box and multi-select is a list box can support single or multiple selections, while multi-select typically allows multiple selections. Okay. Next pattern is select. Select is a widget that allows user to choose one option from the list. So here it's very simple. We can choose any one option from the list. And this select pattern works best when users need to choose a single value from a similar set of options. Next is tabs. It is a set of layered content sections where one section is visible at a time, like this: movie, cast, review. And this pattern works well for organizing related content into distinct sections where users switch between different views or categories. Now, next is toolbar. Toolbar is also a container for a set of controls or buttons that provides common actions. So here, those who are provide the common action, they are grouped together. So toolbar works best for grouping related controls that users access frequently. And we can see such a set of controls in our Microsoft Word document. Okay. Now last pattern is tree. And it is a hierarchical structure that allows users to navigate and select items such as file system, or in our case, an Angular project structure. Okay. So these are the various area patterns we have learned so far. But just a note, Angular area is not a direct replacement of Angular material. Instead, Angular area focuses on delivering core accessibility behaviors and patterns free from styling constraints. And this approach empowers developers to create custom and accessible UI components with complete control over their markup and CSS. So that's all about Angular area. And I hope this video has given you the confidence to start working with area patterns. Now, let's dive into the next development updates and learn more about the newly added style sheet feature called Tailwind CSS. And to understand how Tailwind CSS works with Angular, we will start with the installation part, followed by reviewing some documentation and then a demonstration. So if you are new in Tailwind CSS, then after completion of this video, I am sure you will confidently start working on Tailwind CSS with Angular application. So let's begin with the installation part. I'll jump into the Visual Studio Code Editor and let me open the package.json file. Here I'll search the Tailwind CSS. And here I don't see any results. This is because if you remember, while creating the project, I choose SCSS as a style sheet instead of Tailwind CSS. And this means that Tailwind CSS classes will not work in this project. Although we can install Tailwind CSS manually, and to do so, we should visit the official documentation of Tailwind CSS on tailwindcss.com and then click on Get Started, then navigate to Framework Guides and then click on the Angular. And there are 6 steps we need to follow in order to set up the Tailwind CSS in an Angular project. Also for practice, you can add this CDN link in your index.html file. But note that this approach is not suitable for production. If you are working Angular version 20 and below, then either you can install the Tailwind CSS by using these 6 steps, or you can go with this CDN link. But now we are working with Angular version 21. So we should take advantage of the default Tailwind CSS installation. So I will quickly create a new project with Tailwind CSS using the command ng space new space project name Angular 21 Tailwind CSS. And once I hit enter, you will see a prompt to choose the style sheet. And this time I'll select Tailwind CSS. Then I'll choose Y for server side rendering, and then I'll select Gemini AI tool. And after a few seconds, our project will get created. And now we have successfully created a new project with Tailwind CSS. Now I'll go inside the project and I'll open this project in Visual Studio Code Editor using command code space dot. And now here, let's open the package.json file. Here we can see two entries are added related to Tailwind CSS. Tailwind CSS slash post CSS and Tailwind CSS. And both with the same version greater than 4.1.12. Also, inside style.css file, there is one import added for Tailwind CSS. Okay. Now I'll go inside app component HTML file and I'll delete all the default code. And to test the installation of Tailwind CSS, I'll add a heading with an h1 tag with text hello Angular 21 and apply the Tailwind CSS class text red 300. Now, when I run this project using command ngs and navigate to the localhost 4200, we can see the heading in red color, which means that our Tailwind CSS is working fine in this project. So by choosing Tailwind CSS during project creation, Angular set up everything automatically. We did not have to manually do a single step to install Tailwind CSS. With this, we have completed our first part, that is installation. We have explored three approaches to installing Tailwind CSS. First is manual installation, second is using a CDN link, and third is creating Tailwind CSS as a style sheet during project creation. Now, let's move forward and get familiar with the basics of Tailwind CSS. And to learn Tailwind CSS, you will need a solid understanding of HTML and CSS because it is a front-end framework similar to Bootstrap. And frameworks like Bootstrap and Tailwind CSS offer similarities like pre-built CSS classes for styling HTML elements and creating responsive layouts. However, Tailwind CSS and Bootstrap differ in their approaches. Tailwind CSS provides building block for custom designs, while Bootstrap offers pre-made templates. So here, if you read the Tailwind CSS documentation, you will understand that you don't need to memorize all the classes. Instead, you can simply search for what you need and copy paste the class name, just like with Bootstrap. For example, if you want to change the text color, you can simply search for color and you will see various pre-built classes available. Then you can copy paste the one that suits your needs and requirements. Here you can see this particular class like text red 300 represents this style. This first column is the Tailwind CSS class and second column is the styles. So here you can understand how the Tailwind CSS class represents the styles. If you go inside the text decoration color, here also you can see decoration current represents the style text decoration color colon current color. Similarly, if you need flex related classes, then head to the flex box and grid section and there you will find the classes flex, flex wrap, flex direction as well as utility classes for justify content, justify items, align content, align items, and more. But in Bootstrap, to center the content horizontally, we would use justify content center class. And in normal CSS, we would use justify content colon center. But in Tailwind CSS, we simply use the class justify center. So it is simpler than Bootstrap or normal CSS. Okay. So we can use utility classes like these in Tailwind CSS. Now next here, you can also find classes for padding, margin, width, height, font family. We have already seen the color. Then you can also find the classes related to background, related to borders, effects, etc. And effects including box shadow, text shadow, opacity, and more. Here you can see under opacity, the syntax of this class is opacity hyphen num. You need to provide the number like this: opacity 100, opacity 75, opacity 50, and opacity 25. Okay. So the thing is, you don't need to by heart every single class. Just search in the documentation and copy paste what you need. That's it. So without investing more time on the documentation, we will move forward with the demonstration. But I hope now you are a bit familiar with Tailwind CSS, even if you are new to it. So now let's add these Tailwind CSS classes to our login signal form for an actual demonstration of how Tailwind CSS works. And for that, first I'll copy the signal forms HTML and TS files from our previous Angular 21 project and paste them into our current Tailwind CSS app component. So let me go inside this Angular 21 project, and here I'll copy the template file of signal forms. Control A, Control C, and here Control A, Control V. And for this demonstration, I'll keep only one button, that is login. And next I'll copy the PS file. So here I'll copy this portion and paste it inside the app class. Also, I'll copy the imports, common module and field. Okay, let me import it here. Let me delete this router routlet, and I need to copy this interface also. I'll delete this part, and now I'll rerun this project one more time. Okay, no errors. So we have copied this HTML and TS file, and we will ignore this custom CSS in the signalforms.scss file. Instead, we will use Tailwind CSS classes directly in the template file. Okay. So let's see how the signal login forms looks without CSS. Okay. Let me close the previous tab, and here you can see the login form without CSS. Let me inspect this page, navigate to the console, and now here if I touch both the field, and here let's see, oh sorry, we removed the validation part from the class file, right? Let me uncomment this, and let me import all the validation functions, and now save the changes and navigate to the browser. And if I touch any field and leave from that field, we are getting the validation error. Email is required and password is required. Okay, so validations are working as expected. Now here I'll fill the values and click on the login button, and we are getting the user entered values in the console. So it means the functionality works fine, but the UI is unstyled because we haven't added any CSS yet. So first, let's center this login form both horizontally and vertically. And for that, what we will use? We will use flex related classes. So here, before this form, I'll take one div and I'll close this div after this form. Now here I'll add class flex to display the element as a flexible container. Then I'll use next class justify center. It centers the child elements horizontally within the container. And then I'll use item center to center the child elements vertically within the container. So this class we can use for vertically centered, and this class we can use for horizontally center. And also we need to specify the height and width. For height, I'll write h screen. It sets the height of the element to the full height of the screen, that is 100 VL. And for width, I'll write w full. It sets the width of the element to the full width of its parent container, that is 100%. If you go inside the documentation and if I search height, here you can find the class h screen, means height 100 VL. Similarly, inside width, if you click on the show more, And here you can see if you want the width 100%, then you have to write the class W full. So it means this div element will take up the full height and width of its parent container and center its child elements both horizontally and vertically. So let's test this first. And as you can see here, if I minimize this till 100%, it is perfectly aligned center horizontally as well as vertically. Now next, let's add styling to this form. And here I'll write class equals to, I'll apply the width 1 by 4. And before this W, I'll write LG. This class sets the width of the form to a quarter of its parent container's width on large screens. Here you can also set the width of the form to half of its parent container width on small or medium screen. If you are not writing anything before this W, it will consider for small or medium screen. And this classes also you can find under the width or height section. So here we are already inside the width. So I'll show you. Here you can see width 1 by 2 means it will take the half width, and W 1 by 4 means it will take the 1/4 width of this container. Okay. Next, I'll apply some padding like P4. 4 means 16 pixel. And then I'll write the background color. And for background color, we have the class BG and color name. So I'll apply white color. And next, for rounded corner, I'll use class rounded. And also I'll add some shadow. So I'll use class shadow empty. It adds a medium sized shadow to the form and gives us a slight depth effect. Okay. So this form will take up a quarter of the width on large screen with white background, rounded corners, and a medium sized shadow. So let's test this as well. And here you can see if I refresh this page, you can see the light shadow with white background. And next, for this view, I'll just add the class margin bottom 4. And now let's add classes to change the font of this label. So first class, I'll write block. It displays the element as a block level element and it takes the full width of its parent. Then I wish to apply the text color to the medium dark gray. And for that, I'll write text gray hyphen 700. I want the color medium dark. That is why I have written 700. Then I'll add class like text SM for small. It sets the font size to small. And if you want to make the font bold, then you can use font bold. You can notice most of the classes are similar to Bootstrap. So if you create 2 to 3 projects using Tailwind CSS, then you can easily recognize most of the classes. Okay, now last, let's add some margin to the bottom. So margin bottom to 2. So we have added block, text gray 700, text small, font bold, and margin bottom 2. So this element will take up full width of its parent with a medium dark gray text color and have a small font size with bold font weight. So let's test this. And as you can see here, medium gray color, small text and bold font. Now next, let's add the border to this input box. And for that, so here I'll write the class equals to, I'll increase the font and I'll take this line here. Block. Again, I'll use width full, padding 2, border. We'll use border with color gray, and this time I'll use 300. And I'll add rounded as well, rounded class to round the corners of input box. Okay, it's simple, right? Now save the changes, and as you can see the result here. I'll add some margin top also, margin top 2. Now looks good. Next, let's add the classes for this error messages. So here, instead of this error list, I'll write class text red 600 and next class text small, and here also we'll add margin top 2. And these classes are display error messages, which is having bright red text color with extra small font size. Here you can see the error is in red color. If I touch this and if I leave the cursor from that field, we'll see the validation message email is required in red color. So we did everything for this email field. We have added this classes for this email label, and then we have added the Tailwind CSS classes for this input box, and last we have added for error messages. Now I'll copy and paste the same classes for the password field as well. So let me quickly add this margin bottom 4 to this div, and then after div I'll add the classes for label. The same classes I am adding. Then for input, I'll copy this class and paste it for password input field. Okay. Now last error messages. So inside this UL, I'll paste the copied classes. So let me see one more time. Let me refresh the page. And yes, if I touch and leave the field, we are getting required error messages. And here, if I type incorrect email ID, we are getting another validation message, enter a valid email address. Okay. So we have correctly added classes to both fields except the login button. So let's style the login button now. So here I'll break the line and add class. First, I'll set the background color to a bright, vibrant blue using the class BG Blue 500. And on over to this button, I want to change the background color to the darker blue. So for that, I'll use class BG Blue 700. But I want this class on over to this button. So here we need to write over. And then I'll change the text color to white. So text white, and then font bold. And then here we'll use the new class PY2 and PX4. PY2 means it adds padding to the top and bottom of the element. Similarly, PX means padding on x-axis. So this PX4 adds padding to the left and right of the element. Now last, we have added color, then white, bold, and PYPX. Okay, last I'll add rounded. Now save the changes and let's have the look. And yes, now the login button is in blue color. And if I hover to this button, it is not changing the color. Okay, let me add the hyphen. And now you can see if I over to this login button, the button color changes to dark blue. Okay. Now last, we will use the ng class directive to disable the login button when needed. So for that, here again, I'll break this line and I'll write ng class directive inside square bracket. And the ng class directive is allows us to bind our classes to the element based on a condition. And this is an object that defines the condition and the classes to be applied. And our condition is login form dot invalid. So here I'll paste the same condition. And if this condition returns true, then only it will apply the classes. So before this condition, we have to write the classes. Write colon, and here inside single quote, we will write classes like opacity 500. It means it reduces the opacity of the element to 50%. So it looks like disabled. And next class I'll write cursor not allowed. And this class changes the cursor shape to a not allowed symbol. We'll see this on the web. Okay, so this specific code will apply a disabled style to the button element when the login form is invalid. So it is preventing form submission until it's valid. Let's save the changes. And if I over to this login form, you can see how the cursor is changing. It is indicating that the button is not clickable. Okay, now here if I write the correct email ID and password, now we can see the normal cursor. We can click on the login button. And if I inspect the page and navigate to the console, you can see the object with user entered values. Okay. Last, let me check the validation. If I delete this, we are getting the required validation. And if I type anything, the validation message changes to enter a valid email address. Same for this. If I delete this password, we are getting the required validation message. And if the form is not valid, our cursor is also changing. Okay, so everything is working fine. All right. So we have added CSS inside template file using Tailwind CSS. We didn't add a single line CSS inside the app.css file. So personally, I feel it's similar to Bootstrap. And if you know how to work with Bootstrap, then you can confidently work with Tailwind CSS as well. Now next, let's explore the @apply directive of Tailwind CSS. So as we worked on styling the signal login form, I am sure you might have noticed that we ended up repeating the same set of Tailwind CSS classes multiple times. For example, we had to apply the same classes to both the email and password fields, including labels, input field, and error messages. But imagine working on a large form with multiple fields. Repeating the same classes over and over would be a lot of work, or this is not a good practice. We are going to tackle this issue and find a way to make our code more efficient, maintainable, and scalable. So, to achieve this, we will keep the same classes in one place and reuse them whenever needed, eliminating the need for repetition and making our code more manageable. So let's get started now. As we can see here, in the first div, we have used 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 classes. And if I wish to apply the same 5 classes to another component, so instead of repeating the same classes in both components, what should we do? We should write them in a reusable class in our global CSS. And global CSS means style.css. So I'll open style.css here and I'll copy these 5 classes from app.html file, and here I'll write the class name, for example main container, and inside this class I'll paste copied 5 classes. And now I'll copy the same class name from here, and inside app.html file I'll replace the class name with Tailwind CSS classes. Okay. Now, you might wonder why we are writing these classes in style.css instead of the component CSS file. Like here, I'll open app.css file and I'll copy the same class and paste it inside the app.css file. We can do that. But as you all know, they would be scoped to that component only. And again, it is limiting reusability. So by keeping them in style.css, we can reuse these classes across multiple components because this is the global style sheet file. Whatever CSS you are going to write in this file, that will be applied to all your project. But here, just adding Tailwind CSS classes under the class name in style.css file won't work because here also you can see the error. And if you save the changes and go back to the browser, you won't see the changes. So to apply the styles globally, we need to use the @apply directive. And this is the powerful feature of Tailwind CSS. And we need to add this directive before the Tailwind CSS classes. And what does this @apply directive do? It enables us to create custom classes by combining multiple utility classes. And when we use @apply directive, Tailwind CSS generates these classes into the corresponding CSS code. Like for this flex, it gets converted into display colon flex. This will convert into justify content colon center. Similarly, align items center, height 100 VH, and width 100%. Okay. So hope you understand the use of @apply directive. Simply, it's generate all these classes into the corresponding CSS code. Now save the changes, and if you navigate to the browser, the classes are applied and the form is perfectly centered both vertically and horizontally. if I remove this class name from here, you can see this form is in top left corner of the web page. But as soon as we add the class here, we can see the form is in center. So now next, I'll apply the same approach to remaining classes using the @apply directive. So let me copy these form classes and paste it inside the style.css file. I'll give name login form. Here you can give any name, but make sure it's clear and understandable. So inside that, I have pasted the copied classes and I'll add the @apply directive. Now save the changes and instead of these classes, I'll write login form class name. Now next, I'll copy the label classes and here I'll give name login label and I'll write @apply space classes. Copy the class name and paste it here. And we have used same classes for this label, password field label. So I'll paste the same class name. Similarly for input, I'll copy the classes and here I'll copy paste this for 2 more times. And here I'll apply this input classes. So the class name should be login input. And I'll copy this class name and paste it here. Also, I'll give the same class name to password input field. Now next is error messages. I'll copy this UL classes and paste it here. And I'll change the name to login UL. And I'll give same name to this email field UL as well as password field UL. Okay. Now next we have covered both email and password field. Now next I'll copy this button classes and paste it here and I'll change the class name to login button btn and I'll paste same name here. Okay. So if I find the class here, you can see we have moved almost all the classes to the style.css file. Now let's test the changes in the browser. And everything looks as the same. If I touch the field and leave the cursor from that field, we can see the required error messages. If I type the wrong email address, we can see the error message changes to enter a valid email address. And same for here, if I type 1234, the error message changes to password must be at least 5 characters because for this password field, we have added min length and max length validator here. You can see min length validator for 5 characters and max length validator for 10 characters. So here we have to enter more than 5 numbers. Okay. And if this form is invalid, we can see the cursor shape changes to not allowed symbol. With this, we can't click this login button. And as soon as if I type the correct email address, the login button is enabled. So everything is the same as before. Okay. So let's understand what are the benefits of the @apply directive. And the first benefit is simplifying maintenance, which means if you need to update the styles, you can do that in one place rather than having to update multiple elements or components. Like here, if you want to change the error message color to orange, so you can simply change this in only style.css file and save the changes. And if you see here, the both error messages are in orange. Okay, let me change the color to green. Now you can see the difference clearly. Okay, both my error messages are in green. So it means the maintenance is very simple. Okay, now next benefit is improve readability, which means your CSS code becomes more readable because the purpose of the style is clearly defined in a single class. And the third benefit is reduce duplication. If you have multiple elements that require the same set of styles, you can create a single class and applies those styles. And that we have already done for all the elements. Overall, @apply is a powerful feature in Tailwind CSS that helps us to write more efficient, readable, and maintainable CSS code. So far, we have covered a lot of exciting updates and new features in Angular 21, and we are going to explore another concept under the style guides in Angular 21 called prefer class and style over ng class and ng style. So under this, we will dive into the differences between these approaches. So we will start with ng class versus class and then moving on to the ng style versus style. So I'll jump into the Visual Studio Code editor and let's start understanding ng class versus class. So what is the use of ng class or what is ng class? And as we all know, ng class is a directive in Angular that allows us to add or remove CSS classes from an element dynamically. And until now, we have been using ng class to dynamically add or remove CSS classes. It accepts an object with class name as a keys and Boolean values. For example, let me create a Boolean signal variable inside the class file of this app component. So here I'll create signal variable called isActive equal to signal of type Boolean and I'll initialize it to true. Now, if this isActive variable is true, I want to add a specific class to our element. So let's create a CSS class inside app.css file. So here I'll write the class name active class and inside this class I'll write background color brown, then color I'll set white and font weight bold. Okay, so these three styles I have added inside this active class. Now that we have our CSS class and we have a Boolean variable. So let's write the syntax for ng class. So inside template file, after this form, I'll add an h2 tag with the text signal login form and then apply the ng class directive to this h2 element. And the syntax for ng class is inside square bracket, we need to write ng class equals to, it accepts an object. And inside object, we need to write a key and value. As per syntax, key is class name and the value is variable or condition. Okay. So this is the syntax of ng class directive. But in our case, our class name is active class. So I'll update this with active class and our condition is active. If this is active variable is true, then only apply this class, active class. And the is active is a signal variable, so we need to call this variable with parentheses. Now, this active class will be added to this h2 element if is active variable returns true and remove the same active class if this is active variable returns false. Now save the changes and let's test this on the browser. Let me load the browser on localhost 4200. And since isActive is currently set to true, the active class is applied to the heading and we can see the styles being applied. And here, if I inspect the page and select the h2 element, here you can see active class is added. And if we change the value of isActive variable to false, here you can see the active class gets removed from an element and the styles no longer apply. And here inside the template file, we can also directly add the Tailwind CSS classes using the ng class directive in Angular 21. Like instead of defining the separate class name, we can add the utility classes directly to this directive. For example, text read 700 space font bold. And now if I refresh the page and I'll change the value of isActive to true. Now inside this element tag, you will see text rate 700 and font bold classes added to an h2 element and styles are also applied. Okay. So I hope you have understood the ng class directive. Now let's do the same thing with class binding. For that, I'll replace the class name with Tailwind CSS classes. And I'll comment this ng class directive. And on line number 4, we will write the syntax of class binding. And the syntax of class binding is, it is also wrapped inside the square brackets and it is bind with the class name. I'll cut this class name from here and I'll paste it here after dot. And equals to, only we need to specify the condition, that is active. We don't need object here. So the syntax is very simple. Class, along with that class, we have bounded the class name and equals to the condition, which is active. And currently is active variable is true. And this means the active class will be applied if the is active variable returns true. So the key difference between ng class and class binding is that ng class uses an object to map classes to conditions, whereas class binding uses a direct Boolean value or a conditional expression. Okay, so let's save and check. And the class is added to an element. Also, the styles are applied to the heading. And again, if I set this value to false, the class is removed from an element. Here you can see. And styles are no longer applied to the heading. Now, let's try another scenario. While learning Tailwind CSS, we used ng class here. So now let's replace it with the class binding. And if there is only one class, then we can use the same syntax, which we have used here for heading. Class dot class name equals to condition. Like here, I'll show you. I'll cut this and I'll paste it here and I'll comment out this line. Now here, I'll convert this ng class to class using the same syntax. And the syntax is class dot property name. I'll copy this property and paste it here. And after that, we don't need the object. We just need to specify the condition. And the condition is login form dot invalid. And this means this cursor not allowed class will be applied to the button only if the form is invalid. Let's test this first. And as we can see here, if the form is invalid, the cursor is displayed as a red circle indicating that you can't proceed. But in this syntax, we have used only one style. And what if we need to apply multiple classes conditionally? We can't use this syntax. Instead, we will use the conditional operator. Like in this case, if this form is invalid, I wish to apply the classes opacity 500 and cursor not found. So I'll paste these classes here. After that colon and empty string. And with this syntax, we don't need to bind any classes because we have already added that classes inside the first condition. But note that the class binding accepts a single class name or a string of classes. So here we used the conditional operator to conditionally apply classes. But for more complex scenarios, the ng class directive is often more suitable. So now let's test this. And the cursor turns to red circle with 50% opacity. So now, if both ng class and class can achieve the same result, then why does Angular prefer using class over ng class? And the reason is Angular seems to prefer class due to its advantages in performance, readability, and functionality. So in terms of performance, using class is more performant because it's a built-in Angular feature with less overhead compared to ng class. And since ng class is a part of common module, you need to import it explicitly, whereas class is a native Angular feature. So if I remove this common module from this import, and if I comment out this class and uncomment this ng class, we will get an error saying can't bind to ng class since it is not a known property. So this demonstrates that class has a performance edge over ng class. Now, in addition to performance, class also has an advantage in terms of readability. Like class binding syntax is more straightforward and aligns with the standard HTML attributes, making templates easier to read and understand compared to ng class. And finally, when it comes to functionality, class is better suited for simple and static class assignments, whereas ng class offers more flexibility for dynamic classes, while ng class provides more power, but class is more lightweight and efficient solution for simpler use cases. So to conclude, when should we use class and when should we use ng class? We use class for simple and static class assignment. Also, we can use class to toggling a single class based on a condition. Whereas we can use ng class for more complex scenarios such as applying multiple classes conditionally and situations where you need more flexibility in your class assignments. Okay, so in this example, both approaches works equally well, but the class binding is more concise and straightforward solution. And ultimately, the choice between class and ng class depends on your specific use case and personal preference. Okay, so this is all about class versus ng class. Now, let's explore style versus ng style. Now, again, what is the definition of ng style and style? ng style is a directive specifically designed for dynamic styling, whereas style is a property binding that can be used with an object or individual style. So let's understand this practically. So for this ng style, I'll create a new signal variable called isVisible, and that holds Boolean value true. Signal of type Boolean, and inside bracket I'll write. Now let's write the syntax of ng style. Inside square bracket, we need to write ng style, and this ng style also accepts an object. I'll remove this class and I'll add the curly braces. So this ng style accepts an object with any CSS property as key, and the conditional expression evaluates the value. Okay, so this is the syntax of ng style. But in this case, I'll use the CSS property display, and the conditional expression will be isVisible variable. If this isVisible variable returns true, I'll set the display property to block and none if it is false. Now let's test this. And since this isVisible variable is true, it will execute the first condition, that is setting display to block, and the heading will be visible on the web. So let me, okay, can't bind the ng style. So again, in order to use ng style, we need to import the common module like ng class. Now let's save the changes and we can see the heading on the web. And if I set this isVisible variable to false, in this case, it will execute this second condition, setting display to none, and the heading will be hidden from the view. Okay, so this is how ng style works. Now let's try rewriting this same using the style binding. So I'll comment out this, and on line number 7, we will write the syntax of style binding. And everything is the same. The only difference is style accepts a string, not an object. So let me remove this object from here, and instead of passing this key value pair, we will bind this style property directly with the style. So here after dot, we need to paste this CSS property display, and then only we need to pass the conditional expression as a string value similar to class. And if you notice, style binding syntax is similar to class binding. Okay, let's save and check. And I think so the value of isVisible variable is false. That is why the heading is hidden from the view. If I change it to true, now we can see the heading on the web. So we have used the style binding with a single CSS property, that is display. But again, what if we need to apply multiple styles? So to handle this, let's create another signal variable called heading styles. and that holds an object with multiple CSS properties such as border, let's say 1 pixel, solid, black. And I'll add one more style, font width, bold. Okay. And now in the template file, we just need to pass this heading style object. So again, I'll comment out this line and we will write the code on line number 8. And to pass the object variable, we don't need the class property. Here, we can directly pass the object variable, that is heading styles. And since this is the signal variable, we need to add the parenthesis. That's it. Simply style equals to object variable name. Okay. Now save the changes and we have added the style, border and font weight. Let's test this on web. And as we can see here, the heading has border and bold font. So the key difference between style and ng style is style property can work with individual style or an object, whereas ng style is a directive that works with multiple styles dynamically. And again, style is a built-in feature of Angular, whereas ng style requires the common module. So when you need to apply simple styles based on a condition, style is a good choice. But for more complex scenarios where you need to apply multiple styles dynamically, ng style is a better fit. So therefore, in conclusion, we have explored the differences between class versus ng class and style versus ng style with examples. While both approaches can achieve the desired result, it is generally recommended to use class and style if possible, and reserving ng class and ng style for more complex scenarios. And that covers the Angular 21 updates as per our agenda. We have explored project creation, seen the updates on HttpClient, learned how new applications are zoneless by default, understood signal forms and Angular ARIA from scratch. We have also seen how to work with Tailwind CSS, and lastly, understood the difference between style versus ng style and class versus ng class with examples. So I hope this video has helped you to understand how to work with Angular 21. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this comprehensive video on Angular 21 updates, kindly support me by liking, sharing, and subscribing to FED Learning. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave a comment below. Thanks again. Bye bye.